Hi, I'm Rick Dior, and we're back with part two of this hand technique for intermediate and beginning players. And today we're going to talk about bad habits that I see my students who come to me for the first time have when I watch auditions for the college, or I just see people play on YouTube, or, I go out to see people play that I notice. So these are all habits that will hamper your playing to a certain extent, and sometimes lead to hand injuries like tendonitis and carpal tunnel and things like that can really affect your career. So this is a very important thing to me that I teach. So the first thing I see most often is the pinky out problem. So that seems to be a thing that people do. It can be really bad when people play with all their fingers out like this. I actually see that sometimes, and that's I don't know. I don't even know how you could play like that. But eventually, that's going to catch up with you, because just doing that creates all kind of strain in here. If you have some sort of tendonitis in your elbow and all that, it's usually from your fingers being tense like that. All right. Or if you're hitting like this, that will certainly create tennis elbow. A lot of carpenters get a problem. In the old days they'd get it because they'd use hammers, but now they use nail guns. And when you lift up a nail gun like that and you're squeezing constantly like that, all right, that will create a problem like here in your elbow. So that's something you want to avoid. So your fingers should be in like this. And the way I think of it with the match grip is the grip is here, and it's basically the side of your thumb and then this first joint here. All right, like that. Now, you shouldn't play with this kind of squirrel grip. I call it a squirrel grip because squirrels grab a nut and they eat it like that. If you play timpani, that's called a French grip, like that. Snare drumming, drum set drumming, all that, you don't want to do that, okay? Because there's not a lot of power here. The power is in that muscle there, okay? It all comes together here. So what you want to do is aim your stick to something with the knuckle, the front knuckle, on top, all right? And then bring it down with the arms at your side. That's it. That's the orientation. Okay? So if you use your wrist, it would look like that. If you use your fingers, it would look like that. Now, if you have a problem with corkscrewing is when the stick turns, and before you know it, you're at the end of the stick, or sometimes it turns the other way. I don't know why it does that with people, and they end up in the middle of the stick. That's much more rare. But if you're corkscrewing, you can put the thumb on top of the stick, but not move your wrist so it's straight up. You get it? So it's still like this, but the thumb can move to the top of the stick, and that traps the stick here, a little firmer grip. It'll keep it from corkscrewing. I will, when I'm playing really fast bebop, move my thumb a little bit towards the top. When you look down, you should see a space. If you see closed up, you're doing it wrong. All right? So if you're like this, which I would say, about 75% of drummers I see today, that's the way they look. No space at all. You've lost all your real estate, okay? Because when you open your hand, you've got all this space to move. When it's closed, you got that far to move. Doesn't matter how big your hands are. When you're closed up, you're crippling the movement. When you're open, you use your fingertips, and you have all this finger strength. And you see that space there. Bad habit number 3 is this drifting finger that drifts down. So in other words, the fulcrum, the grip here, is not stable anymore. If you're trying to grip with these fingers, you can't use them. All right, so you don't want to do that. Basically, the grip should be here, all right, like that. And then you're using your fingers to move the stick. So if your finger's down like that, there's no stability. You have to use your wrist because you don't have any stability on your grip, and then you're gripping with these fingers. So that's a mistake. In the old days, if you would have done that, the teachers were a little rougher back then, and were in New York City. in New Jersey. And so if you did that, they would smack you on the on the knuckles. And you know, they were very, very strict about technique. And you know, you don't see that. I don't hit people on the knuckles, but you don't see that much anymore. But I am very strict with my students on technique in a nice way. So that's a really bad habit, that finger coming out. All right. So far, to recap, we got the pinky out. No. All right. We got the thumb that actually goes on top and the whole wrist rotates like a French grip. The squirrel grip. No. All right. We have the no space here. No. Okay. We want space. And we have the finger coming out here. All right. That's also a no-no. So the right way is to hold the stick right here between this first line, we'll call them joints, and the second line, and then the thumb on the side. But when you're going really fast, if you have a corkscrew problem, again, the stick moving down, you can experiment with putting the thumb on top. That's okay, because that solves that for folks who aren't as developed in their strength, in their grip. Okay? So those are the bad habits. Now, of course, the worst bad habit that I see is the actual hammer blow, where the student or the professional or whoever it is holding the stick like this, and they're literally playing. And a lot of folks I teach online, when I first see them, some of them are doing that, which, you know, is instinct, basically. You know, we're tool users. Pick up the item, hit it, and then eat it, or whatever you're going to do with it after you hit it. That is in our brain from birth. So what we want to do is not that. We want to do this. Combination of fingers and wrist. All right, so those are the bad habits for the match grip. And, you know, take it or leave it, but this will, if you have one of those bad habits and you improve it, it will improve your playing quite substantially. Now let's talk about traditional grip bad habits, because all kinds of things can go wrong with this grip. It's a very complicated grip. It's hard to teach, as I spoke about in my first video. And in that video, just to recap, we talked about the different ways to practice. Real quick, we talked about doing this with the forearm, okay? And then we talked about just the thumb. And then we talked about the fingers over. So those are the important things to work on when you're first starting to learn the grip. But the things I see that are problems all the time are people don't use their fingers. They're playing traditional, but they're just using their thumb like this. And then these fingers are out to lunch over there, right? They're not even touching the stick. They should always be right around the vicinity of the stick. And they will touch the stick. So if you remember from that first video, the bottoms and the top fingers are regulating the movement of the stick, which brings me to the second bad habit, the bottom fingers being tucked in like that. See? That's not good. They should not be tucked in. They should be right under the stick, so the stick is moving between them. So they shouldn't be touching your hand. They should be in midair like that. And what you'll notice is they'll move in a little bit of a circular motion. When you play slow singles, what happens is this. The stick is going to hit that bottom finger. The other mistake I see, and we talked about this in the first video, is hitchhiker's thumb. This is with traditional grip, where you're doing this, and the thumb is up. And usually with hitchhiker's thumb, these fingers are out, but not always. Sometimes they're in, and somebody's playing like that. Okay, that's a no-no. You want to put your finger down and touch this first one like that to create a home for that stick. See? When you're like this, the stick can move back on you like this, and then you lose control. And when you see people play like that, mostly they're moving in circles. They're all over the drum. They can't move straight because that stick is not trapped. All right, let's get to wrist problems with the traditional grip, which is really, really common. So you see a lot of people playing traditional like this, where they're not only using their wrist, but they're actually using their arm, and their arm is jammed against the side. that's really bad, all right? Because then you have no mobility. So what you want to do, and this is what I call a reset, is put your arms at your side and, put your head down. And then just really loose and take a deep breath and let all the tension out of your body. And then bring up your hands and just plop them on the drum. That's how you should feel when you're playing. So your arm will be about 2 or 3 inches at the elbow away from your body, depending on the way you're built and how fat you are. Okay, so the left hand here is going to look like that. All right. So the other thing with that stiff wrist that happens is, once again, the arm is bearing the brunt of all that, impact. So if you do this a few times, no problem. If you do it a million times, you're going to have a problem because it goes right up the arm there. What you want to do is let that stick bounce, as opposed to this. Traditional grip can create incredible problems with your elbow, all right, if you're not playing it right, and also your wrist. There's people who get cysts here, all kinds of weird things because they're playing too tight. You got to let that stick bounce. Now, I spoke of this in the first video, but one thing you really want to do is use a little bit heavier stick when you're warming up. And that creates strength in your wrists. It also loosens you up. You try not to do too much fast stuff with it, and I kind of limit it to 20 minutes to most with these really heavy sticks that I use. I'll do a combination of singles, individual strokes, and paradiddles. Just all kinds of doubling exercises like that. And I'll start slow, and I have a video on warming up that you should probably check out. I talk about all this stuff on that. You can just type in warming up on the channel and you will find it. You can tell, like, if you look at someone and you're well versed in traditional, if they're doing something wrong. If you're not well versed in it and you're teaching it, you need to be well versed in it, because chances are you're probably teaching it wrong, and that student is going to run into problems later, and you're probably going to run into problems too later with it. But this is a really complicated grip, and I learned it from the greatest, Joe Morello, and I basically would just stare at his hand just pretty much the whole lesson. He was blind, so he couldn't tell what you were looking at, and I would just watch him, and I had all the exercises we were doing memorized, so I would just watch his hand and copy it. That's what I did. I have this photographic thing in my head of his hands playing. He had big hands. He was a big guy, so his fingers were a lot longer, but that's all the stuff that helped me as being in person. So that brings me to my last topic. If you're going to study these things, I would definitely recommend finding a teacher to help you with your hand technique, at least for a while. It needs to be someone who's played professionally and who has really good technique, and hopefully has studied with someone who has great technique, so they picked it up that way. Because otherwise, you can be in for some trouble, and you will kind of hit the proverbial glass ceiling eventually, where you'll only be able to get so good technique-wise. If you want to play fast, if you want to do different kinds of styles that create that, use speed with either hand, you're not going to be able to play them like ever if you can't get your bad habits under control. And the only thing that can really help you with that, it's not necessarily YouTube or any of these other services, like you can watch a video, because it's only one way when you're doing those things. You're not getting feedback. You need someone to watch your hands and tell you what you're not doing right or wrong, and then put you sort of on a prescription for success there. What exercises do you need to fix the bad habits you have? That's the way you'll get better. So seek out a teacher. You can do it online if you want. It's a little more difficult doing it online, but I've done it for years, and sometimes it's super successful because you can get the camera really close. Other times, not so much. But if you can find someone in person who really can play and knows their stuff, that would be the best thing for you to do, whatever town or city or country or whatever that you live in. And that way you get feedback to fix some of these bad habits. So I hope all this helps, and we'll see you next time.